With Stormblood around the corner, I have seen many people screaming for horizontal progression without actually understanding what it is. Horizontal progression is when multiple pathways are viable for use and all equally capable of operating within the same confines. So they need to be made equal but different. The biggest test for if something, mainly gear and jobs, meets this rule within Final Fantasy XIV is endgame rating. If something can operate within the most extreme case to test its merit, then it can operate out of it. There's an idea that seems to float around with some people where they are calling something horizontal progression that is not horizontal progression. When you create something that only operates well within one given situation, say elemental gear you need for a fight, you have not created horizontal progression, you have created situational vertical progression. So if you create an endgame where different sets of gear are viable but only within specific situations, then you are creating situational vertical progression where some things will be desired for one instance and absolutely hated in another, as well as dreaded gear bloat. For Final Fantasy XIV, a situation that would create horizontal progression would be if on Dragoon, a full skill speed build was capable of doing just as much damage with little variance as a high critical hit build within the same confines. The end results in terms of damage are the same, but how they operate is different. This is not something that exists within Final Fantasy XIV for a few reasons. The biggest reason this does not exist is that stats are too shallow to allow for this, and critical hit is too highly valued. We have effectively three substats in Final Fantasy XIV: critical hit, determination, and speed, be it skill or spell. The rest do not really factor into this, as parry is next to useless, and you cap accuracy no matter what. For some jobs, speed can be outright useless in any form besides that of possibly advancing a global cooldown tier, which is a minuscule improvement overall. So for this job, Paladin, the pool of useful stats is even smaller. For a horizontal progression system to be implemented, we would need more possibilities, but there are other issues preventing that as well. Let us say that somehow a speed build is made viable for Dragoon. It does a lot of damage, but it only lasts about as long as Red Armor in bed, 30 seconds, till it runs out of TP and ceases to function. This means that build is not viable. But what about Goad and other TP restore abilities? This doesn't really change anything. That Dragoon build becomes viable only in those situations, which creates another problem. It only works with those extra jobs as a crutch, and two at that in the most extreme situations, with Ninja and Bard or Machinist being Dragoon's crutches. Somebody get a medic. We have a hobbled, legless Dragoon here. Oh wait, he's doing his job and tanking the floor. This means that if that build's damage is so high that people want it over higher average raid DPS, we have created a composition issue where people want just that composition and nothing else. However, let's get back to the issue from a moment ago. TP is a very limiting factor, keeping other possible builds from being viable, so TP and shallow stats are issues keeping horizontal progression from happening. Now for another facet of what is keeping horizontal progression from being a thing within Final Fantasy XIV. The game is trying to operate in a fairness system and carrot-on-a-stick design. The fairness aspect means that Yoshida wants every job to be capable of doing every piece of content to their fullest, which boggles the mind as to why he keeps resist down debuffs in the game. These aren't unique. They punish people for not bringing very specific team comps. That's an issue for another time. The carrot-on-a-stick design means you get a reward for your actions, even if it might mean going through some punishment. But with this, the carrot must be equal to the effort it takes to get said carrot. In the case of Final Fantasy XIV, the carrot has been made gear. Now with that in mind, what happens if we make horizontal progression? Each means of obtaining said gear, assuming said gear is somehow made equal but different, needs to be equal to the reward. If one means is easier, then the other one is destined for neglect, which would mean that either the easier one should have a lesser reward or the higher one needs a better reward. You know what else this does? It divides the player base. Good job! Now, what happens if those sets of gear are not actually equal? People do the math and find out which one's better. What is better could vary depending on job. So now we have some jobs that want to do this thing and some that want to do that thing. Congratulations! We have now divided the player base based on job. You know what else happens here? Development time has been wasted on the pieces found to be irrelevant. I don't think there is a single MMO that has actually succeeded in horizontal progression. Every MMO people have touted as doing so, I examine and am shown situational vertical progression, and even some flat-out neglect of some aspects. Horizontal progression is a giant headache to try to implement and keep fair. Meanwhile, vertical progression, where if you try this hard, you get this reward, but if you go even harder, you can get that reward, is easier to implement and fair, assuming effort equals reward, which in Final Fantasy XIV is not even 100% true, or no tome gear would be a part of any best build. I know I'm gonna get those that want to screech that it's not fair to those that can't raid, but there's only one thing to be said in response to that. If you can't put in the effort to get that reward, you don't deserve that reward. So in that aspect, the system works. It is fair to those that can't raid. And if that is truly a big issue to you, then I suggest you find another game to play.